Disruption and fallout from the Venezuelan attack. The United States has seized the head of state of another country. We said we're going to take control of that government, and we're going to take control of their oil resources, and we're going to spend it on things that we think we need to be spending. Some of it may go to their people, but President Trump has been unambiguous about saying we will take the oil and we will spend it how we want to. Now, this raises so many issues here, and there's so much to talk about today. We're going to try to get it in there. And to try to help us figure out a lot of this, we have Patrick Henningsen back with us today, who is a journalist, geopolitical analyst, and founder of the news and analyst website 21st Century Wire, host of the Sunday Wire show. Patrick, as always, welcome back to the show.
It's great to be with you, Daniel.
Man, listen, I mean, you and I have been talking about the possibility of an action in Venezuela. Can't speak for you, but for me, this did not turn out the way that I feared that it might. But in some senses, it's even worse, not just on what happened on the ground, because I think that it's pretty common consensus among most that the military operation itself, take the morality out of it, but just the nuts and bolts of how it was conducted was nearly flawless from the United States on a number of fronts. But that has only opened up a whole can of worms. And so many things are unresolved. But I want to lean in, first of all, on what I think is some of the more problematic and troubling of this, and that is the legal framework and the legalities of this and what that portends. Now, as we're about to see here, there's a number of folks that are absolutely big time cheering this on, but they're going to make some claims here. And this is what I want you to start weighing in on, because I think that they're going to be saying some things that are just categorically untrue, but they're saying them with conviction. Here first, responding to some on the Democratic side who are saying, this is illegal, et cetera, is former Attorney General Bill Barr.
Clearly illegal under international law, right? No, full stop, UN Charter, no question there. Clearly not legal under the Constitution, because though presidents of both parties have argued against this, the Constitution is really pretty clear that the representatives of the people get to be consulted and ultimately approve military activity. That has not happened here at all. Again, there's nothing legal about this.
Well, first, on the Constitution, he's just wrong. It does not require it for military activity. It requires it for going to war. And we haven't gone to war here. And otherwise, over our entire history, presidents have had a lot of latitude deploying military forces and using force in a targeted way to deal with threats to the United States and to enforce our laws. And this is justified both as a law enforcement measure and as a national security measure. As the international law, it is not a violation of the international law. First, we have never agreed that under the UN Charter, the only time you can use force is when you're actually under armed attack by somebody else. We've never agreed to that, and that's not the only reason for defending yourself. We've always taken the position we can use force to defend our vital national interests, the safety of the American people. So he's simply wrong on that. Furthermore, under international law, we clearly are the victim here. They have been violating international law by using their sovereign territory and their de facto control to conduct hostile activities that are slaughtering Americans. What are we supposed to do? Just sit here and let a narco state act like that? You can't use law enforcement to prosecute them over there and get their cooperation, because they are the problem. And so it's like in Panama. This is an appropriate situation where we can enforce our laws by going in and arresting the perpetrators. And this
let me squeeze that.
Okay, so a lot to unpack there. I'm going to get to some, but I want to start off with what to me was the biggest, you did not just say that out loud. We're the victims, and that Venezuela is, to quote, slaughtering Americans. That's what he's claiming as his justification here. And okay, first of all, there are somewhere around 75,000 Americans die of overdoses per year. The last couple of years, especially, primarily of fentanyl. Not 300,000 like Trump has been saying for a long time. That is a complete lie. He knows it's not true, but he loves to exaggerate with these massive expansions. But whatever, the number is not small, 75,000. Nobody is, this is not like a terrorist operation where somebody puts a gun to your head and squeezes the trigger and kills 75,000 Americans. This is drugs that are provided, and the Americans pay for it and choose to do this, and they are suffering the consequences. So this is not a terrorist issue. No one is slaughtering anything. This is someone providing money. And then most importantly for this, Venezuela provides hardly any drugs that end up in America. Most of theirs end up in Europe. So what is this really about? Talk to me first about your impression of his claim that Americans are the victims here of international law.
It's just hyperbolic. It's just completely over the top rhetoric, and it doesn't conform to reality at all. It's kind of embarrassing that a former U.S. Attorney General would go on national news and make the statements that Bill Barr is making with conviction. It's sad. Because it's a terrible way to end out your career, which has been less than stellar, to be honest. But he said a few things that were just ridiculous. One is that the U.S. is a victim, and you're right. To say that Venezuelans are slaughtering Americans, but without giving specifics. So he's making an emotive, rhetorical, hyperbolic type of plea, kind of like a desperate kind of liberal. Really, I mean, so he's invoking, without saying it, the responsibility to protect Americans. I mean, there is no evidence of narco trafficking by Nicolas Maduro or Venezuela. There's no evidence of narco-terrorism. If there was, Daniel, you can be damn sure that it would have been plastered all over the global media for the last 3 or 6 months or a year. And by the way, this term narco-terrorism, this was kind of conceived under the Obama administration. I mean, it's been chucked around before, but it was put on paper during the Obama administration. So why didn't Barack Obama, Joe Biden, Trump 1.0? Because there's no legal basis for doing anything with the fabricated concept of narco-terrorism. Otherwise, so this administration's finally decided that they had the gumption to fabricate a case so that it could run finally, after 15 years, run with the narco-terrorism canard, basically. And the other thing that Bill Barr said, which is what Marco Rubio said, and this is when you know that things are completely out of control. They're saying our vital national interest. Rubio said that at the press conference. Venezuela's threatening our vital national interests, not national security. No, because you might have had a legal argument there. But they're saying national interests. What exactly is that? How do you define national interest? An economic interest? Oh, we don't like the fact that we're not allowed access to their markets. We're having an economic crisis at home. What is it exactly? Is it because the democracy in Venezuela, is that somehow connected to, is this a new conservative doctrine that we don't know about? It sounds like Samantha Power. I think Bill Barr is cross-dressing. It's really Samantha Power and drag,
yeah,
I think. I mean, it's hard to know where to start, but they're all repeating the same talking points, Daniel. And Pete Hegseth will take it even further, which we can talk about later, but he's saying that we can project American will anywhere in the world. And what exactly is American will? Another vague, arbitrary term. You can pour anything into there. So, and again, what about the wife? What are the charges against Maduro's wife, Celia Flores? They fabricated a case against her because very cynically the Trump administration knew if they went and kidnapped Maduro, his wife would have the global stage, a global platform to advocate for the release of her husband, to basically criticize the U.S. and become a sort of iconic figure of defiance around Latin America. So very cynically, they kidnapped his wife just to keep her on remand. And it's going to be 18 months in the Southern District of New York before this thing even goes to opening arguments. It's going to be well over a year. So wow. Trump might not even be around by the time he won't even face the music, probably, by the time this comes to trial. There's nothing there. If they had done this, Daniel, in a national security court in the Eastern District of Virginia with a whole jury or CIA contractors and NSA employees, maybe they could get a conviction with blacked out windows and no press, okay? But it's not. It's going to be in New York. There's no way they have any kind of coherent case against him. It's completely fabricated, all of it. And, you know, look how many coups the United States has done since World War II or just since 1989, okay? When has there ever been a credible case to remove a head of state in a coup or in a abduction? Let's talk about Haiti. We talk about all these other countries, or them assassinating Salvador Allende in his palace in September 11, 1973. There's never been evidence of anything. This has just been always a unilateral extrajudicial assassination, coup d'etat, or extraordinary rendition. That's what this is. It's an extraordinary rendition. And
well,
to dress it up as a legal thing is just, to me, ridiculous.
Well, and let's go with one of the other claims that he made in there, that taking over this country, killing all the people that were killed. Apparently up to 40 people were killed in security services, many of which were Cuban. All of that is, he says, does not violate international law. Is that true? Absolutely
not. You know, so is this the standard now? Because if this is the standard, if the Russian Federation send in a special ops team to Kiev, can they kidnap Zelensky for war crimes? Because there's plenty of evidence that he has also, you know, given orders for some heinous war crimes in the last 4 years. Vladimir Zelensky. So is that fair game? Can Russia do that? Can somebody helicopter parachute into a NATO member state and kidnap a head of state because they don't, President Erdogan, or take your pick. So if this is the standard now, you're asking for total anarchy. There is no evidence. I mean, this is just this is a laughable rap sheet. I mean, the head of state, who's the commander-in-chief of the Venezuelan armed forces, on machine gun charges. Is this like Bugsy Malone? Or are machine guns illegal in the United States, by the way? Can you possess those in the U.S.? Probably yes. Without bump stocks, sure. I mean, this is just, if that's the best the DOJ can do, you know what, this just is like a Stalinist show trial, because the president's surrounded by yes men. Everyone's terrified to deliver, they're not going to deliver the goods. So Trump probably didn't speak to Bondi directly, probably spoke to an intermediary, and this is how Washington works. And they say, have you spoke to Pam? Is it ironclad? And they say, oh yeah, I spoke to her. It's airtight, Donald, Mr. President. Absolutely, it's going to stick. So Donald Trump doesn't even know what was on the charge sheet. I guarantee you. And so everyone's terrified to tell the president, the boss, something that he doesn't want to hear. And this is how you get this incompetence that just rises up to the top, right across the board, in every single lane.
You know, Patrick, I'm not even sure that Trump was asked that, or that he asked that. I don't know that he even cares. I think he just said, throw something on a piece of paper. I don't care. Just put something on there. We'll just tell them it and they'll believe it, because
it's clownish.
So many of these other things. Yeah. I want to show you a couple of other things here. This is Representative Salazar, a U.S. member of the House, that, I mean, almost I'm surprised and a little bit disappointed that she's not wearing a cheerleader uniform, because that sure is what she was doing yesterday.
We have a fantastic leader called President Trump. And thank God that because of him, justice caught up with Maduro. And a new chapter has begun. Oh, yes. For the Venezuelan people, a new chapter has begun for the hemisphere, as a new chapter for the whole hemisphere. And I was saying to my two colleagues that Maduro is a very blessed and lucky guy, that he did not fall in the hands of the Cubans, who were supposed to be protecting him, because he would be dead right now. He fell in the hands of the Americans. He's going to be able to have a good life in jail for the next 40 years for what he did, but he is alive, and he is in the hands of our troops. So he is a blessed guy. In our 240 years history, it proves that we are not an occupying power, like some of my colleagues on the other side of the aisle are saying. We're not an occupying power. We are a liberating power, and we restore power, and then we give it back to those who who are in that country. We are a very benevolent country.
We are a very benevolent country. Do you think that the people of Iran or Venezuela are going to buy into that?
He stuttered, and we give it back to, and she stuttered, said, give it back to who? Trump said that if we don't like the person who's in power, we're going to take them out again. He said it. If you don't like the way they're saying, if they're not letting our corporations in, we're going to take them out again. So, I mean, this is the bourgeois Latino class, the ones that are given golden visas in America if they just say Maduro must go, just like Syrians who get golden visas for 10 years that said Assad must go, and et cetera, et cetera. The U.S. is full of, or the Iranian diaspora, who are calling for the restoration of the monarchy, Reza Pahlavi. It's the same thing. So this is the elite bourgeois class, the Botox class of Miami and Washington, D.C., and so so we've established there's no basis whatsoever for the narco-terrorism, for narcotics trafficking. If it was really going to stop cocaine coming into the United States, it would cause paralysis in the Beltway, because everybody knows Capitol Hill runs on that stuff. Okay, so I mean, I'm sorry to point that out, but you know, let's just say, but that Maduro is a bad guy, and he's this and he's that. There's so many fake NGOs, transparency NGOs, set up by the U.S. to do anti-corruption investigations on Maduro. And you hear this, Maduro's done this, he is a thug, he's a dictator, he's this, the elections are illegitimate. Okay, if the elections were illegitimate and he wasn't popular with the people, he probably would have been thrown out already. You know, he's hugely popular in the country. The majority of that country leans working class. He is a former bus driver union head who rose up the ranks within the Chavista political movement, a socialist leader, very popular among the working class. He has the support of the people. So, but in America, especially in the media, even in the centrist arguments, they'll say, what, if they do this with Putin as well, look, I'm not defending Vladimir Putin, but, you know, we shouldn't be, you know, involved in a proxy war in Ukraine. They'll say, look, I'm not defending Maduro. He's a thug and he's a dictator, but we shouldn't invade Venezuela. What the U.S. and the CIA have done in their global media campaign is to kind of effectively create the background noise that, well, I don't support this operation, but at least Maduro has gone. And they did the same with Saddam Hussein, and the same with Muammar Gaddafi and Slobodan Milosevic, and the list goes on and on. So this is part of the psyop. It's very hard to prove that he is corrupt or that he is somehow responsible for human rights violations. They fabricated all of the human rights violations practically in the Caesar report, which they used to put crippling sanctions on Syria. That's just one example. Look at the Magnitsky sanctions. Same thing. The Sergei Magnitsky story, which was pushed by Bill Browder. Same exact. This is a formula that's been used over and over. And what you see is really amazing. They talk about Maduro has destroyed the economy. It's a mess. Like Trump said, oh, it's a shambles. Look at what he's done. It's awful what they've done to this country, and blah, blah, blah. They won't say that the Venezuela has been under unilateral crippling sanctions by the United States for 20 years, but specifically for the last 10 years. When they imposed the latest crippling round of sanctions in 2016, Venezuela, its production or export of oil dropped 75% between 2016 and 2020. 75%. That means an average of 62% GDP per capita drop because of U.S. economic warfare, and they went on full-on currency war to devalue the Venezuelan bolivar, and using all sorts of tricks with currency markets, and seize their gold reserves, which are now probably worth $5 billion plus. You could use that as part of a stabilization package if they had access to their gold, or they had access to oil markets. The United States has got a full embargo right now trying to stop the 80% of their oil that goes to China. So if you really care about the Venezuelan people and you say that, oh, there's shortage of medical supplies, the hospitals are in a state, You have all these bleeding heart, fake conservatives all over the U.S. media saying, oh, we need to help the children of Venezuela, and it's terrible what's happening. They don't have toilet paper. I mean, it's ridiculous. They won't say a word about the fact that the reason it's terrible, the reason the country was bankrupted and plunged into debt default was because of the United States. I mean, it's amazing how this doesn't even get mentioned in any of the media coverage, and that's intentional. You won't see the New York Times or the Washington Post leading with that because it's kind of obvious. This formula has been used over and over and over again on target countries like Iran, like Syria, like Libya, etc., Russia, perfect example, and many others. North Korea, Cuba for the last 80 years practically, or 75 years. So the sanctions don't work. Sanctions are war on the people. Governments get up to work in the morning, they have to run the country. Sanctions are there to target, U.S. sanctions to target the people in the hopes, in the infinite wisdom of the CIA and the State Department, that they'll rise up and overthrow the, quote, regime. This has been done over and over and over again. We blame the government for, mismanaging the economy. If they had normal access to markets, and they had, full ability to free trade, this would be a very, very, very prosperous country. But they have not been allowed that in the United States. You know what? The recovery that Venezuela has made economically in the last 3 years is miraculous. At one point 2 years ago, they had a lower annual inflation than the United States. This is after we bankrupted them. They pulled back from the brink. This is why also they're in a rush to take down this government, because they don't want it to be a success story, that they overcame U.S. sanctions. And what they've done is miraculous. And that shows you the level of commitment and skill, and they've been able to pull that off to get solidarity with the population to get through this foreign imposed economic crisis by the U.S. on Venezuela. That's one of the reasons why they want to take them out now.
Danny, get your mic.
Sorry about that. That's not one of the reasons that Trump is saying that we went in there. It wasn't, oddly enough, he didn't mention any of those. Instead, Gary, if you could play that one where it says Trump do something, here's what he's saying is really at stake here.
We have a very sick neighbor. It's not a neighbor, but it's close to a neighbor, and that's Venezuela. It's very sick. Colombia is very sick, too, run by a sick man who likes making cocaine and selling it to the United States. And he's not going to be doing it very long, let me tell you.
What does that mean? He's not going to be doing it very long.
He's not doing it very long. He has cocaine mills and cocaine factories. He's not going to be doing it very long.
So there will be an operation by the U.S. and
it sounds good to me. And by the way, you have to do something with Mexico. Mexico has to get their act together because they're pouring through Mexico, and we're going to have to do something.
So Trump is saying that, Venezuela is a sick man. Here's the big problem. And so far, most people are still talking about what happened with Venezuela, understandably. But Trump is already signaling maybe there's some others that need some corrective action. He singles out Mexico and Colombia. Are you worried that this is not over?
No, it's definitely not. Marco Rubio is desperate to settle his, patriarchal blood feud with Castro that he claims he was a victim of. If I'm not mistaken, I think Rubio's family left before the revolution, if I'm not mistaken. But anyway, he feels like this is going to be his life's work, culminated with overthrowing the, quote, regime in Cuba. And they've also got their sights set on Colombia. And what's interesting is if you look at the speeches immediately after by the vice president of Venezuela, Delcy, and then also by Gustavo Petro, the president of Colombia, both of them mentioned Israel in their sort of opening defiant speeches in response to what has happened in Venezuela, which is interesting. What it shows you is they're very, very familiar with the United States political system. And they even mentioned the Epstein files. Gustavo Petro said this is a corrupt regime in Washington who have attacked Venezuela to basically deflect from the terrible attention and press Trump's getting from the cover-up of the Epstein files. So, I mean, that's the rhetoric coming out. They support Palestine. So Israel and the U.S. are kind of in a team effort. Israel wants to flip all these Latin American countries and get them to reverse their vote, recognizing a Palestinian state. The UN, the United States can help them to do that by force if necessary, as we saw this past week, and they can repeat that again. And Daniel, it's not just confined to Cuba and Colombia. Nicaragua will also be on this list. They've already U.S. interfered in the Honduran elections, which was 3 weeks ago. That directly interfered, and I think we even spoke about that at the time. And so they want to flip all these Latin American countries to get the left or the socialist-leaning governments out and replace them with, pro-U.S. right-wing governments. And Brazil, that's not off the table either, and so on and so forth. So they feel like they've done half of South America, which is mostly the Argentina and the sort of western half of South America. In the United States, the CIA want to flip the rest of Latin America, and they think this is the way to do it. The problem is, Daniel, Donald Trump has overpromised and underdelivered so often in these other theaters, and he has massively front-loaded the promises on this. Himself, Marco Rubio, have written some big checks in this press conference a couple of days ago. They said they're going to modernize the Venezuelan oil industry. They're going to pay compensation to the Venezuelan people. The Venezuelan people are going to be rich. Is any of that going to actually come to fruition anytime soon, if ever, under this arrangement that they're saying? And they're going to say they're going to control the government. How are they going to do that? Can they control the people who support the government? How's that going to work?
Yeah, and I'm going to get to that in just a second. That's actually on my list of things to discuss because I think it's profoundly important. Before we get too far away from it, I want to jump back to something that Bill Barr said a second ago, because he said with the weight of his former office and his very confident demeanor, many people listen to it think, oh, well, I guess he's telling the truth. I guess the Constitution, this is not against the Constitution. I guess this is not against international law or American law. No, he is flat, dead ass wrong. If I can just, that's about the nicest way I can put this. One of the things he said in that soundbite that I put there, he said that the Constitution does not say that you can only use military force if you're going to war. It doesn't say you have to be attacked. The Constitution does say that the commander-in-chief in Article 2 cannot use armed forces unless he has first gotten authorization from the Congress. Period. It doesn't say if they've done this, that, or the other thing. He can only use it if the authorization has been given by Congress. That was more pointedly spelled out to remove any kind of confusion in the 1973 War Powers Act, which, whether he likes it or not, is American law. The very law he said we didn't violate. Here's what that law says. The constitutional powers of the president as commander-in-chief to introduce United States Armed Forces into hostilities. Period. Into hostilities. Or that's a comma. Doesn't say anything about choosing to attack because you claim that he violated American law. If you take them into hostilities for any reason, or into a situation where imminent hostilities is clearly indicated by the circumstances, are exercised only pursuant to 1, a declaration of war, 2, specific statutory authorization by Congress, or 3, a national emergency created by an attack upon the United States. Period. We have not been attacked. There is no congressional declaration of war. There is no statutory authorization. And then you see there in Section 3, the president in every possible instance shall consult with Congress before introducing United States Armed Forces into hostilities. We, without any question, entered into hostilities. We killed a bunch of people in Venezuela. We went in with 150 military aircraft. It was the Navy, the Marines, and several other, the Delta Force. This was flat out, unequivocally, the use of American armed forces by the commander-in-chief without authorization. Ergo, it broke American law. What do you say to that?
I mean, for back to Bill Barr or any of these people, they all swore an oath at some point in their public service to protect and defend the U.S. Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic. They all took that oath. But as you and others have rightly pointed out, Daniel, many times, is that that oath is not to the President of the United States. That oath is to the U.S. Constitution. And the problem here that we face as a country is that the Constitution is the mortar that keeps the bricks of the republic together and coherent. This keeps the U.S., it keeps the international system somewhat stable, okay? When you remove this and you just start arbitrarily interpreting the law based on your will or based on what you want to do or based on what the leader says and not the actual rule of law, how can you expect anybody else to abide by the rule of law in your own country, let alone other countries in the international system, you see? So, and again, this gets back to a whole host of conversations. I mean, we can talk about the violation of posse comitatus. All these are impeachable offenses, and it's sad that the Democrats shot their load on stupid Russiagate and Zelensky phone call impeachments during the last 4 years, and you don't see anybody basically pushing back very, very, not meaningfully anyway, because at the end of the day, they're all on board with regime change in Venezuela, Democrats and Republicans, and that's one of the big problems. Is this just is so emblematic of the institutional corruption that you have in Washington. The uniparty, deep-seated corruption within the institution of government that they've been able to get away with this so many times.
I talked about the 1973 War Powers Act. I wanted to bring this up here. This is Article 2, Section 2 of the United States Constitution. The President shall be Commander-in-Chief of the Army and the Navy of the United States and of the militia of the several states when called into the actual service of the United States, which was specified in Article 1, exclusively resides in the Constitution or with the congressional powers. So whether anybody in the Congress wants to accept it or not, whether the president wants to accept it or not, or a former attorney general, that is what the Constitution says. So when he says that, he is either grossly incompetent or he's lying. I suspect it's probably the latter. I doubt that he's unaware of what the Constitution or the 1973 War Powers Act, but that is part of the deception, because most people aren't going to do what I just did and pull up the Constitution, pull up the law. They're just going to listen to him and agree with him and think he's telling the truth. He's not. So what does that do to our credibility and the trust we should have in our government?
Well, it's a problem domestically, within the domestic political setting. And again, it also sets a bad precedent. This is just more concentration of power into the executive branch, which if a Democrat comes into power or another Republican, whatever, they're going to just use and maybe increase the concentration of executive power. This has been the trend all along. But internationally, Bill Barr also said another lie, which is that this doesn't violate the UN Charter, or we never recognized the UN Charter. That's just patently false. The United States is a founding member of the United Nations. It was founded in New York City after the Second World War. The U.S. is a charter member. So for Bill Barr to say that really just shows any lack of knowledge of history and no appreciation at all for international law and the frameworks that the United States helped to build after the Second World War, and why, in the wake of the Nuremberg trials, undeclared war of aggression was seen, not the Holocaust, but it was an undeclared war of aggression between states is seen as the ultimate crime. And this is these ended up being enshrined in the founding principles of the United Nations, international law framework because of that. So is he saying, and is the Trump administration saying, we're going to let's throw out all of the historical precedent? There's another problem with this. This is a fundamentally undercuts and undermines a treaty, a whole host of treaty law with regards to extradition, how countries cooperate in terms of law enforcement, raising arrest warrants, judiciaries working with each other vis-a-vis indictments, etc. So the U.S. has already jumped off the cliff on this during the Bush administration by normalizing the practice of extraordinary rendition. But even then, that was kind of seen as very, very bad publicity at the time. And they've been very careful to tiptoe through that mess. We still have Guantanamo Bay there Unfortunately, that's just an eyesore on U.S. history. But this has really destroyed, I think, any international conventions in terms of cooperation and law enforcement between countries. The United States is supposed to lead, at least pretend to lead in this department, even if it breaks its own rules, fine. But at least in its own hemisphere, it can just give the veneer that it observes these conventions. It's not doing it under this administration.
Dan, open your mic.
Sorry about that. I did that again. We're actually trying to claim that we are trying to follow these, and we are putting a veneer. Here was General Jack Keane on Fox News early saying this is actually not regime change, and in fact, we're doing a good thing.
We're not about nation building here. This is not Bosnia-Herzegovina. It's not Iraq, and it's not Afghanistan. Why? Because the democratic structure already exists in Venezuela, albeit it's in the wrong hands under Chavez, under Maduro, and now under the vice president. There is a Supreme Court. There is a National Assembly, a legislative body. There is an executive branch. There is a civil society that has been significantly repressed for the last 14 years and absolutely punished. But that society will come to life and be energized and be in the streets supporting a movement towards elections, which is what the administration wants to do.
So let's see if I got this right. This is not regime change. It's just in the hands of the wrong people. So we went in and airlifted out and seized by force of arms and took the guy out. But this is not regime change. And the people are going to be so happy someday when hang on a second, because President Trump didn't say anything about handing this back to the people of Venezuela. As a matter of fact, this is what he said about who's going to run Venezuela when he talked about Pete Hegseth and Marco Rubio.
Are you saying that Secretary Hegseth and Rubio are going to be running Venezuela, and will you be sending in U.S. military troops to provide?
They're going to be a team that's working with the people of Venezuela to make sure that we have Venezuela right. Because for us to just leave, who's going to take over? I mean, there is nobody to take over. You have a vice president who's been appointed by Maduro, and right now she's the vice president, and she's, I guess, the president. She was sworn in as president just a little while ago. She had a long conversation with Marco, and she said, we'll do whatever you need. I think she was quite gracious, but she really doesn't have a choice. We're going to have this done right. We're not going to just do this with Maduro, then leave like everybody else, leave and say, let it go to hell.
She has no choice. That kind of sounds like regime change to me. How do you read it?
I don't know. To Jack Keane, by the way, Bosnia-Herzegovina, that's a new pronunciation of that. But the civil society that Jack Keane is talking about that was decimated was the National Endowment for Democracy, USAID, and all the host of George Soros NGOs, including the ones that funded Maria Corina Machado and kept her fed and watered for the last 15 years. That's the civil society Jack Keane is talking about. What Trump is talking about is a colonial arrangement. Marco Rubio as the viceroy of Paul Bremer. He's the Paul Bremer. With his Doc Marten boots on and his suit, and that's his position. And what is Pete Hegseth? I mean, I don't think he can manage anything else in his portfolio, or Rubio for that matter. Secretary of State, come National Security Advisor, come Viceroy of Caracas. I mean, it's just ridiculous. They're not going to be able to manage that, and not on behalf of the people. The people. Trump even admits that Maria Corina Machado doesn't have a popular support base in Venezuela. Truth be known, he's probably jealous that they gave the Nobel Peace Prize to her, and so he's spiting her by not endorsing her because she took his prize. So he may think that could be the case, but the government that's in place, the vice president was not appointed by Maduro. She ran as a vice president, or she's part of the government that's popularly elected. Now, the U.S. can say, oh, we have evidence that there were irregularities in the elections. They do this all over the world to delegitimize elections where they want regime change. This is what's happened here. And our media is so cowardice, and they won't push back on any of these points. Like the election was illegitimate. Maduro's a dictator and et cetera, and he's not popular and he's holding on with an iron fist. This is not true. Okay, you might not like the fact that the majority of people in Venezuela lean left, that the working class support this government. You might not like it, but it's a fact. But by the same token, a lot of people might not like the fact that Donald Trump got elected in the United States, other people in the world or in the U.S., but he did get elected. Okay.
Yeah.
So if you're setting a very, very horrible precedent here, but it's really the whole thing is propped up on a whole bunch of pillars of lies.
Yeah, and I want to go down that path a minute. You mentioned the Viceroy of Caracas, Marco Rubio. He went on U.S. television yesterday to talk about some of this stuff. And, of course, the claim has been made over and over that this was about American law. This is about the slaughter of American people. We're the victims and all that, right? We showed you that a minute ago. And President Trump said, oh, this is about the drugs. It's about the drugs coming in and killing our people. So we had to stop all that, right? That's what he said. Then, of course, he adds in that we're going to take over the political control of the country and we're going to take physical control of the oil. Secretary or Viceroy Rubio was asked about that point yesterday.
States need to take over the Venezuelan oil industry?
Well, we don't need to. First of all, let me go back up. We don't need Venezuela's oil. We have plenty of oil in the United States. What we're not going to allow is for the oil industry in Venezuela to be controlled by adversaries of the United States. You have to understand, why does China need their oil? Why does Russia need their oil? Why does Iran need their oil? They're not even in this continent. This is the Western Hemisphere. This is where we live. And we're not going to allow the Western Hemisphere to be a base of operation for adversaries, competitors, and rivals of the United States.
Okay, that is so packed with stuff that just infuriates me more than I can say. We'll take a few of them here. First of all, this claim that we don't need their oil, we just don't want them to control the oil in their own country. What in the holy hell?
Oh, so Marco Rubio doesn't know what he's talking about regarding the petrochemical industry or the oil industry, even in the U.S. Do you know one of the biggest refineries in the United States, in Texas, okay, is a refinery that is designed to take heavy Venezuelan crude. This powers the U.S. diesel fleet, the trucking fleet. The United States runs on diesel trucks. Our economy, and this is one of the reasons why also Canada is also an important supplier as well. But our hubs in terms of transportation in the United States are split regionally. And in terms of the southern region, the Venezuelan supply of heavy crude, which is used for jet fuel, all military applications, naval ships, power plants, jet fuel, diesel, converting it to diesel for semi-trucks, okay? The petrochemical industry, lubricants, all these things, all these industries the United States has stolen from Germany after blowing up the Nord Stream pipeline, okay, and bringing BASF and stealing all these industries from Europe, they require refined elements from heavy Venezuelan crude. The United States needs that oil. A certain percentage of the portfolio of petroleum in the U.S. is Venezuelan heavy crude. You can get heavy crude from other sources, but in terms of the availability, the quality, and established logistics and transport and refinery operations in the U.S., it makes sense to get it from Venezuela. So the U.S. has really shot itself in the foot. This is one of the reasons for, you know, the Keystone XL pipeline and the Canadian tar sands. Why on earth would the United States, it's so expensive as well to do the tar sands. Why did they spend all that effort doing that those years? Because they needed to isolate Venezuela. Okay, there's geopolitical reasons for all these things. Why is the U.S. sending shale fracked LNG all the way across the Atlantic to Europe? Because to prevent Russia from supplying gas to Europe. Okay, so energy is geostrategic from a U.S. standpoint. It's about controlling markets. It's about dominating markets, and more than that, it's about controlling the decisions that countries can make and controlling the supply, controlling the price, controlling who can buy it. You see, Marco Rubio doesn't want China to buy oil from Venezuela. He says they don't have a right because it's in our hemisphere. Does that mean that U.S. can't have any petroleum from the Middle East or from other sources that aren't in the U.S. hemisphere? What if somebody else made the same move there? But the U.S. believes in its national security strategy that it can draw up the drawbridge of Fortress America, the term they're using, okay? And then this would be the ultimate strategic possession if the United States wanted to trigger, and I'm going to throw out a really scary thought here, Daniel. If the U.S. believed that it could start and win World War III, they would absolutely need to have, I think we spoke about this before, that if they went, it looks like they're going to bomb Iran in days or weeks, and if Iran closes the Straits of Hormuz, it's very important in the United States to ride out the storm economically in terms of supply for their military, for Israel's military, economically to have control over the Venezuelan petroleum supply. Very, very important. And this is a long-term agenda plan, because this won't be their first bombing run on Iran. These will be a series, because they want regime change in Tehran. And we all know that's not going to be done overnight. So you're talking about a longer war that could cascade into a wider war. And so this is part of that. That should scare the death out of everybody, including Americans, that there's people running this administration are not being straight with the public about what their long-term agenda is between Washington and Tel Aviv. Yeah, and Venezuela is absolutely part of it. Absolutely.
You know, I want to jump into a little bit of that. You brought up the American people. I'm going to circle back around to the Iran part here in a minute. But some of the question has been, and one of the questions asked of Trump at that press conference you mentioned a minute ago was, how exactly does this translate into America first? What's his answer first?
So why is running a country in South America America first?
Well, I think it is because we want to surround ourselves with good neighbors. We want to surround ourselves with stability. We want to surround ourselves with energy. We have tremendous energy in that country. It's very important that we protect it. We need that for ourselves. We need that for the world. And we want to make sure we can protect it.
You know, a lot of people didn't buy that whole America First answer on that, one of whom was Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene, who retires today. But yesterday, while she was still in office, she said this about that comment.
My pushback here is if this was really about narco-terrorists and about protecting Americans from cartels and drugs being brought into America, the Trump administration would be attacking the Mexican cartels. Now, I am not defending Maduro, and of course, I'm happy for the people of Venezuela to be liberated, but Americans celebrated the liberation of the Iraqi people after Saddam Hussein. They celebrated the liberation of the Libyan people after Gaddafi, and this is the same Washington playbook that we are so sick and tired of, that doesn't serve the American people, but actually serves the big corporations, the banks, and the oil executives. And so my pushback here is on the Trump administration that campaigned on Make America Great Again, that we thought was putting America first.
Okay, so I may quibble, actually a lot more than quibble, that anyone in Iraq or Libya or Venezuela has been liberated by anything. In fact, their lives were made profoundly worse in both of those first two cases, and I fear it may be the case here. We'll see how this unfolds. But her bigger point is, yes, this is not what we voted for, even though Trump is trying to say. My question of you is, do you think that Trump will ever wear that welcome out? That literally, as he said when he first started running for president in 2016, I could shoot somebody on Fifth Avenue and they'd still support me. I think he actually believes that, because all he's got to do is say a few words like, no, this is still America first, and people are going to follow him. Or is there an expiration date on that support?
That's a good question. That's a good question. And will he be around to be held accountable for that, even through the duration of this current term? That's also an open question. I will quickly, disagree with Marjorie Taylor Greene's saying that Venezuela has been liberated because Maduro has been forcibly removed. That goes back to our previous conversation, Daniel, where I think she just doesn't understand the fact that he is popular and he's not an illegitimate leader of Venezuela, but we can have an argument about that. Trump in his press conference says we need the oil. And just a few minutes before, Marco Rubio is saying, on Face the Nation or whatever. Oh, we don't need the oil. We've got plenty of oil. So this administration, these people can't even, they're all over the place. They have no coherent ideology, no coherent strategy, nothing. It's all ad hoc. They're front loading it with military force, threats, intimidation, breaking the law left, right, and center, and then going on the global media and trying to sort of dress it up like it's somehow legitimate. We had to bomb Caracas because we had to protect our law enforcement officials who were in the process of making an arrest, said based Mike Lee, senator from Utah. I mean, it's just ridiculous. Rubio said that as well. That was their justification. I mean, it's insane. They can't even make up their mind. So was this about narco-terrorism? Was it about the oil? Was it about having a friendly, stable pro-U.S. government? It can't be all three, and you can't sort of make an argument that it's any one of those. They've gone with narco-terrorism on the rap sheet, but then they turn around and say, no, it's about the oil. No, it's about bringing democracy back. No, it's about having a pro-U.S. government that we can.
Right. And that's again what kind of makes your guess a minute ago more plausible that this might be in preparation for something else, i.e. maybe Iran. I wish we had time to go into that. Unfortunately, we're almost out of time here. One last thing I do want to get your view on, and that is, I was talking about the MAGA people. Is there ever going to be an expiration date on that? The same can also go for our allies in the West, especially in Europe. And the question is, they are so often talking about all these evil and wicked things that Vladimir Putin is alleged to be doing against Ukraine. And then it seems that that's exactly what we're doing down here in our own hemisphere. And there was a really awkward question yesterday placed to Prime Minister Keir Starmer of the UK, where he was asked that. And I give great credit, finally, to the mainstream media in the UK who ask a really hard question. Note how he answers.
You've been incredibly clear always that Vladimir Putin's attack on a sovereign country of Ukraine was wrong and ought to be condemned. What about President Trump's attack on a sovereign country of Venezuela? There are all sorts of horrors that we know about President Maduro's government, but for America to strike that country and then capture its leader, that's an action against a sovereign state that surely flies in the face of international law.
Well, at the moment, it's a fast-moving situation.
We know those facts. President Trump, the White House has said that they captured Maduro and they struck his country. So there's a lot we don't know, but we do know that. So will you condemn that action against a sovereign state?
Well, I want to get all the material facts together, and we simply haven't got the full picture at the moment. It's fast-moving. And we need to piece that together. I can be really clear with you that there was no UK involvement in this operation. And obviously we're working in relation to British citizens and nationals who are there with our embassy. But we need to establish a full picture. I then need to speak to President Trump. I need to speak to our allies. But I don't shy away from this. I've been a lifelong advocate of international law and the importance of compliance with international law. But I want to ensure that I've got all the facts at my disposal.
I've not seen him come out and say anything subsequent to that. What is your take?
He was terrified by that question.
His face, it really does in the last part. He really is scared.
They're panicking. Kali Kallis, she's panicking as well. They know that if they don't condemn Donald Trump, then they're opening the door for perhaps Zelensky to get rendered off to a prison in Siberia at some point. The whole thing, the whole facade of the rules-based international order is collapsing. You know, it's also funny, last point I'll make, Daniel, Donald Trump is fetishizing the Monroe Doctrine, calling it the Donroe Doctrine and all this. It was designed to keep European imperial powers from interfering with independent countries in the Western Hemisphere in the early 19th century. So in this case, the United States is playing the role of the European colonial powers, basically interfering in independent states in the Western Hemisphere. These people don't even know history, but they fetishize it and pastiche it to such a ridiculous degree that it renders it meaningless. And the joke is on them at the end of the day. But try to get these people to recognize irony, and you'll be here all day.
Yeah, we will. And I'm sorry I have to leave it right there. I've got to actually go on to another show right now. So thankful for you coming on today, Patrick, and look forward to having you back on again real soon. There's a lot more to talk about. I'm going to be back in about a half an hour talking about blood in the water, Trump's lust for more military conquest, and all of the cheering that's going on in the United States that we need to be very, very concerned about. I'll see you then in about 30 minutes on the Daniel Davis Deep Dive.